Good evening, everyone. This is Ashwin from the Global Alliance for Mass Entrepreneurship. Welcome to 60 Days, 60 Voices, a campaign where we're trying to speak to different stakeholders, thought leaders, experts who work with small businesses across India. As you know, COVID is an unprecedented crisis, and a lot of small businesses are facing challenges that they've not necessarily faced before. And we want to really mobilize the ecosystem around solutions that work, around partners that are really trying to drive change and work together in order to bolster each other's efforts and complement each other's efforts. In today's conversation, we have Samir from Wadhwani Foundation. Samir, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Ashwin. I'm very glad to be here. Thank you.
Excellent. To kick things off, Samir, can you talk to us a little bit about Wadhwani Foundation, the entrepreneurs you focus on and the work you do with them?
Sure. So very quickly about Wadhwani Foundation. This is a global philanthropy founded by Dr. Ramesh Wadhwani, who has been in the United States of America for the last 40 years. He's been a serial entrepreneur himself. So he has built about 42 businesses in his life. 41 of them have been successful. His last exit was $9 billion. And he has pledged $1.5 billion to this great mission of job preservation, job protection, and job creation. And that's really the mission of our foundation. And we have been in existence for over 20 years. It's only in the last 1 or 2 years that in India and in LATAM, we have now gathered tremendous space. Very quickly to tell you about the foundation, it has 4 or 5 key areas that we focus on. There is this Advantage program, which is focused on small businesses. That's the program I lead in India and provide mentorship globally. The second program is focused on what is called as Venture Fast Track, which focuses on startups. We also have a program which is focused on college-going kids, National Entrepreneurship Network, that really teaches and equips the young lads and young people who want to become entrepreneurs. We have a program on Wadhwani Opportunity, which is a program focused on skilling, that is focused on helping the young people get jobs, but we train them on 21st century skills. And we have Wadhwani Catalyst, which is focused on social entrepreneurship. So that's a program which is focused on giving grants. And across the spectrum, really, what we aim to achieve is 2 things, is really focus on helping the current entrepreneurs reach scale, unprecedented scale, and do that professionally. And do is that those who are seeking jobs at the entry level, especially in the different sectors, are really skilled, not only in technical aspect, but also in soft skills. So that's really in very short about what Wadhwani Foundation is all about.
Excellent. And I think it's great to know that you're really working with different segments across almost an age time span and really looking at how you can create many more entrepreneurs starting very young, which is, I think, philosophies that GAME aligns with completely as well. That's excellent to hear. I want to move to the COVID specific conversation and really understand from your experience. You spoke about the Wadhwani Advantage programs focusing on small businesses. So really what you're hearing from small businesses on the challenges they faced during the lockdown and what are they anticipating, or now that the lockdown is kind of opening up, what are they anticipating as challenges in the next month or so?
Sure. So let me sort of break this into 2 things. Let me first talk about what are the challenges that they faced, at least from what we hear, based on my conversations with a lot of them, based on my conversations with the channel partners. And the second is I'll talk about what are the challenges that they can expect post-COVID situation. So in the last 3-4 months that we have been experiencing unprecedented situation in India and as well as globally, I think the small businesses have faced several kinds of challenges. I think the first and the foremost is what I have called in one of my articles is what I call shock and awe stage, wherein they kind of couldn't believe that this situation of pandemic is really hitting them so hard. While many of them were aware of the situation that happened in China, and then slowly it was kind of spreading across the globe, in India, I think it took time for them to realize that it's hitting them on their in daily lives. And that was pretty bad. So I think the first stage that they went through is the challenge of really figuring out what's going on. It's just a shock and awe that that's the situation that I described. And, in this stage, they faced challenges, firstly and most importantly, in terms of really figuring it out, what is the real threat to their lives? So it's about the health situation, right? And secondly, and more importantly, with respect to the threat to their businesses. When it comes to threat to their businesses, I think very particularly, I think one of the first challenges that they faced was obviously a lockdown, which was announced by the government. And lockdown is an unprecedented sort of event that you can imagine that must have happened to them. And during lockdown, it's just not physical, right? It's also, in many ways, we have seen small business owners really have a lockdown in their mind because they couldn't figure out what's going on, how to sort of meet those challenges, how to sort of combat it on a real-time basis. And it was a very firefighting kind of a situation. So I think they went through hell for many, many days because they couldn't figure out how to respond to this challenge. The first was physical lockdown, second was mental lockdown in their minds. And by the time they gathered the pace and they figured out what's going on, I think there were three kinds of challenges with respect to businesses. The first is really complete disruption in terms of demand. I think the one of the most important things that has happened is across the chain, the ecosystem, from small businesses when it comes to inbound logistics of the smaller entrepreneurs or micro enterprises, and when it comes to outbound on the customer side, really their OEs customers or their large enterprises which are customers to them. It was sudden freeze. There was a situation when the order book position dwindled. There was a situation when the planning went completely haywire, and that demand slowdown really hit them very hard. You have a certainty which is there in your future, and then you always make a plan based on what you believe is going to happen. But with this tremendous event that happened in their lives, there was a demand slowdown, and not only slowdown, it was a complete lack of clarity as to what's going to happen because the customers themselves were unclear what's going to happen. So that's the first aspect. The second, really, the challenge was the supply chain disruption. Now, because of this entire chain reaction that happened in the ecosystem, with the demand slowdown and the demand disruption, the supply disruption happened because their raw material supplies, their consumption levels, their procurement patterns, their suppliers, everything went haywire. So this was the second biggest challenge. So we can imagine the both sides of the value chain crippled. And that's really horrific. And the third was really internal challenge because I think the employees of these organizations really took a big hit, right? So they were forced to stay at home, and it's not easy to work when you're staying at home. So there is a question of morale, there is a question of productivity, there is a question of really how to ensure that they collaborate with each other in this situation. So a lot of days were spent in figuring it out, especially for small entrepreneurs, as to how they can work together and not really lose productivity. And at the same time, keep the morale and motivation of the people who are staying at home really up there. And I think these were the three most fundamental big challenges I would say. I think the micro level challenges in terms of the specific situations as a result of these three are very well known. So it's not a rocket science. The cash management, the cash crunch, working capital issue, how is it that they can keep the factories running, how they can pay the salaries of the employees, how is it that they can continue to pay the rent of the premises that they had they were working on, how to ensure that their contracts that they had with the suppliers and the customers, how they need to be rechecked, they need to be redefined given the situation. They face many of these challenges. And I think ranging from the short-term challenge of really, how are they supposed to respond, to medium-term to long-term challenges in terms of looking at these three dimensions that I talked about, the demand side, the supply side, and the employees, which are internal to the organization. I think a lot of time really got wasted, I would say, in terms of in India. I think I've seen also on the good side, some of the entrepreneurs who were really adaptive. They quickly changed their tracks, learned that the digital is the only way to go, and for the time being, and then they embraced the new situation pretty quickly. So I would say these were some of the challenges in the immediate reaction or response that these entrepreneurs had during the COVID situation. Answering your second part of the question, which is basically what are the challenges that they can expect post-COVID? I think fundamentally, very importantly, I would say that the small entrepreneurs have to be prepared that the economy is going to contract substantially. Our internal estimates of Wadhwani Advantage suggest that the economy will contract anywhere in the scenario that we are talking about right now, between 2% GDP to -7 to -10% of the GDP. And that's the reality. So I think I wouldn't sugarcoat my words, but many of the segments in the industries are going to face existential crisis. Many of the SMEs are going to face consolidation. Many of the SMEs are going to face some of the events that they have never experienced before, wherein there is going to be a tremendous pressure on costs, there is tremendous pressure on prices. And when you have this situation, you need to scale down. And it's not easy. It's not like it's not like clay, right? You can change the shape the way you want. It takes long time for organizations to respond to the stimuli which is happening in the environment. And with this situation in hand, I think that SME entrepreneurs should surely expect a lot of the difficult situations, at least for the next 6 months. Now, given that as issue, I think some of the challenges that they're going to face is how to keep the demand running, how to ensure that they can keep the customers churn to the minimum, because it's also in this situation, there is a loss of faith, there's a loss of trust, there is a reliability factor that goes for a toss. We do not know whether the SME entrepreneurs will be in a position to really adhere to or comply with some of the promises that they have made to the customers. So the biggest challenge in terms of the demand situation uptake is really how to ensure that the churn of the customers is kept to the minimum. And how is it that you're going to still look at a possibility of acquiring a new customers in this difficult situation, because you can't travel, the communication in digital media, Indians are not used to it. Traditionally, they believe in face-to-face meetings, especially the small entrepreneurs. And given this situation, they're embracing a new medium. And in the new medium, they have to assume certain things which they otherwise would have picked up in their physical meetings. So their interaction is going to change. The way they interact with the customers is going to change. And that's going to pose significant challenge in terms of how they're going to read the situation, how they're going to convert demand from what is out there to what they can address. And therefore, I think the first and biggest challenge is in terms of changing nature of interactions with their customers, which is going to happen. So that's the first one, which will have impact on the how they're going to raise the demand. The second one, the challenge that I expect going to happen tomorrow, is that the whole paradigm that we had in terms of globalization, inter-regional trade, or the patterns that we saw in terms of buying and selling across the boundaries, whether it is nations, whether it is regions, whether it is continents, is going to change. Because tomorrow, what's going to happen is that your nearshoring, your distance is going to play a very important role. The way I feel it is, especially for small entrepreneurs who had started looking at exports and the global markets more positively, government had talked about giving lots of these incentives, is now going to come under review once again. Now they need to reconfigure their business models in terms of figuring it out as to how and who are the people in the ecosystem that they want to do business with. Are those people going to be near them? Are those people going to be away from them? And it is very important and fundamental, but that's what's going to happen. So therefore, they need to look at the whole aspect of the distance in a new light. And I think that's where they're going to view the customers and suppliers and the partnerships in a very different light. There will be new considerations in terms of how you're going to evaluate who is the right customer, who is the right supplier, who is the right collaborator. So that's the second one that they're going to face tomorrow. The third challenge tomorrow they're going to face post-COVID situation, or as the COVID-19 situation sort of transitions from where it is today to, let's say, September, October onwards. The third challenge is really in terms of making choices between managing short-term and long-term. As you would imagine, this has completely turned the entire situation topsy-turvy. Now, therefore, your ability to look at investing your rupee or dollar in short-term in solving short-term issues versus long-term issues is going to become very, very important. And I think making that choice is going to be harder. So while we might suggest certain mechanisms and frameworks, at the end of the day, the entrepreneur has to use his ability or her ability to really not only predict, because it's increasingly hard to predict, but it's also to adapt, to look at what are the choices that he or she can make judiciously. So therefore, short-term versus long-term, when it comes to managing expenses or when it comes to really nurturing relationships, is really going to matter a lot. And I think that wisdom, that sense, that evaluation is going to become very, very important going forward. The third aspect of is going to be increasingly in terms of how they reconfigure their business model and make it leaner, I would say, because at the end of the day, tomorrow there is going to be tremendous resource crunch. The R&D spends are going to see a sort of a complete slowdown. You're going to see a lot of the money being spent on nurturing the relationships being questioned. So really, money has become costlier, and when money becomes costlier, resources become tougher. It's all about making those choices in terms of how going to utilize those resources. So your equations, or your IRRs, as the finance people would call it, are going to be in completely different. I mean, I would really imagine there are going to be new techniques and new tools which are going to be available for the decision makers to make those choices. That's a third fundamental challenge that they're going to face in future. I think the fourth challenge is really in terms of the management bandwidth and the talent bandwidth. As you can see, the nature of work is changing. Tomorrow, I expect a lot of the fixed costs going down. A lot of the gig economy or the variable contract nature employees will be on the rise. What that means is that to build a culture, to build a camaraderie, to build the teamwork is going to become hard, because the employees are going to look at, the employers are going to look at having contracts which are more short-term in nature, more manageable in nature, more variable in nature. And what that means is that ability of the SLAs which we always talked about with respect to the external service providers, outsourced service providers, are going to become more important even internally. So I think that's a fourth and very important challenge that they're going to face tomorrow. And then the fifth is, I would say from their perspective, is really the question of what do they want to do in life? Because I think when I look at the entrepreneurs today, and when I look at the first generation, second generation, third generation, they're all going through different sort of transitions. And the real big question for them is that, do they need to redefine their purpose in life? Because the nature of the businesses is changing. There are many businesses that they were very passionate about may not exist tomorrow. There are many businesses that they don't have skills in. They need to build those skills in and actually look at those businesses if they want to become and continue to become entrepreneurs. I think therefore redefinition of their own individual identities and what they want to achieve in life through business is going to fundamentally change. So I would say these are the 5 very big challenges in front of the small entrepreneurs tomorrow. I hope I have answered your questions.
No, absolutely, Samir. And thank you so much for that overview. I think one of the themes that I'm picking up really is around uncertainty and being able to make good decisions as kind of the path forward, and around those kind of adaptation, lean business model, and so on. And all of that leads from making good choices around your business today. So I wanted to understand, how is Wadhwani able to support and facilitate some of that decision making? What are some of the perhaps principles that you're discussing even with entrepreneurs? If there are entrepreneurs listening to this conversation, it might be useful for them to even pick those up. But how are you supporting these small businesses in times of uncertainty where they have to make good choices? And what are some principles that you're disseminating among them to be able to make?
Sure. So that's a good question. Once again, I think Wadhwani Advantage is on a very big mission to help the millions of small businesses which are facing the trouble today. And I must inform you that we are on a mission to ensure that we help not only growth-oriented companies, but also companies that could be saved. In the words of Dr. Ramesh Wadhwani, saving the savable. And what we want to do is that we want to focus on 2 kind of buckets in the SMEs. So the first is really those SMEs which are inherently competitive, their entrepreneurs are ethical, the entrepreneurs want to really grow big. And what we want to do as Wadhwani Foundation Advantage Program, we want to help them through a couple of things. We are going to partner with lots of financial institutions, banks, NBFCs, etc., who are now looking at disbursing more credit, or disbursing the current credit, or sweating the current credit better. And we are going to help those thousands of small businesses who would want to put the money to the right use. So we will provide our pro bono business consulting advice to these entrepreneurs by giving them 2 things. The first is really personalized knowledge. So we have developed a large bank of tools, digital tools, do-it-yourself tools. The fundamental principle behind digital tool is really, the entrepreneur can solve his or her problem on his or her own. And that's a principle. What that means is that we, as the Advantage Program evangelists, what we are going to do is that we are going to share those digital tools with these entrepreneurs and really coach them as to how to solve their own problems. So that's on one hand, which is going to be a very important help that we're going to extend through these partnerships that I'm talking about. We have partnerships with associations, we have partnerships with market linkage platforms, which are going to give businesses to these small entrepreneurs as well. So when we think of this, we will basically give these digital tools for them to learn, to become knowledgeable in different subjects, in different domains, and then solve their problems with a proper training and coaching and mentorship and advisory given by our own people. So we will have a curated network of advisors and mentors and coaches and consultants who will actually help and assist these thousands of smaller businesses and entrepreneurs and their direct reports, their functional reports as well, to be able to solve their own problems, which means that they will not only become competitive over a period of time, but they will also become professional in the way they do business. And which our strong belief, our principle is that if you are able to build quality at scale, and if you are able to build quality at speed, and these are the principles that we want to teach our SME entrepreneurs by using these digital tools and curated network of advisors, consultants, etc., then our belief is that India will have not only the large quantity of the smaller enterprises that as we know, but it will also have a very top quality entrepreneurship in our country. In the next 10 years, I would rather be happy to see a highly competitive, agile, smart businesses, and many of them gaining a size which is not really which is not really small for them to compete with, but it is really substantial enough or good enough for them to become competitive, to become strong challengers in their respective segments, and therefore their ability, their competitiveness on a relative plane really goes up. So I would rather see that vibrant community of smaller enterprises in next 10 years, and that's our mission. And through this help, we are going to help these thousands of SME entrepreneurs to be able to do both, to learn and to transform themselves, and to use the help of our curated network of advisors, with which they will be able to do that seamlessly. Now, when it comes to doing this transformation, it's not only about this. We are in a very unique place because we are a global philanthropy. We act like a startup, and our help is that of evangelizing this whole asking for help motion. I mean, typically a smaller entrepreneur, first generation entrepreneurs have always believed in having deep knowledge because they have inherited businesses, they have built businesses. But when it comes to asking for help, many of them even do not know what to help to ask for. What sort of advice that they should seek, how should they evaluate the right advisors. And that's what we want to also do through this program. And not only that, we will not only provide these two kinds of things, but we will also ensure that we as foundation do not charge any money to them. We don't take any equity to them. And that's very important. And additionally, all this curated network of advisors and consultants, we are going to ensure that they give certain pro bono hours of their expertise to the smaller enterprises, because we are very cognizant of the fact that the smaller entrepreneurs cannot afford, and the price sensitivity is extremely high. So there is no reason why a smaller entrepreneur should not get top quality advice, but at affordable price. And I think that affordable charge is what we are trying to negotiate with in terms of with this advisor community. And they have been very generous enough to be able to lend their help to be able to give that pro bono advice to these entrepreneurs. And after a particular point of time, they might get into a paid engagement with the smaller entrepreneurs, which is based on a fee, which is subsidized fee. So it's not that everything will come free to these smaller entrepreneurs. I want to make that clear, but I want to make it also very clear that whatever they will get in terms of the help will be best out there and at the rates, at the charge rates, which are most competitive in the marketplace. So that's our endeavor. And this is what we want to do in 2020, 2021, because our mission is to create a run rate of 1 million jobs by 2024. And that's a significant number, especially given the COVID situation. So we have a tall order to achieve. In 2019, we did our pilot with the first 100 businesses. We are already running, helping over 300 businesses. Our net promoter score is in excess of 75, 80, which is by any standards a decent, very good score. And we want to ensure that we want to help these thousands of businesses over a period of next few years. Our goal is to really look at supporting 3,000 to 4,000 SMEs by 2021 in next 12 to 15 months or 18 months. And we want to ensure that the quality of what they get is always at a high standard. And I think that's what we want to achieve. And if you look at this combination of being a global philanthropy, not charging ourselves, acting like a startup, having a professionalism that really is required to be able to help the SME entrepreneurs to achieve their acceleration in the growth, we are probably one of the only ones in the world doing that. So I think that's what Wadhwani Foundation and Wadhwani Advantage brings to the table.
Excellent. And I think it really ties in well with how you laid out the challenges that small entrepreneurs, small businesses face, and the kind of support that you're willing and able to provide. Just as a note to perhaps small business owners that might be listening, Samir, how can they access Wadhwani Advantage, and who qualifies for services like this? Is there a eligibility kind of criteria, and how can they access it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think the one of the important things that we want to do is that you can visit our website. There is a placeholder there which will sort of help you in terms of reaching out to us. We have a mobile app which is at beta testing. It is available on Android. It is available on Mac devices, iPhones, etc. Please download that app and use that app. That's a medium with which you can reach out to us. We're also going to open up the helpline, CRM helpline center, which is not, by the way, not only aimed at the businesses which are between 10 crores revenue and 250 crores revenue, which are also aimed at much smaller micro entrepreneurs as well, wherein we are going to have that kind of support being given to all this community. And then that's another way of reaching out to us. So if you just visit our website, it is self-explanatory in terms of reaching out. To answer your second part of the question, qualifying criteria, I think first and foremost, we look at entrepreneurs who are hungry for growth, who are not settled on the current rate of growth that they have. They're not complacent. So we are looking at that quality big time. We are looking at entrepreneurs who are ethical and who are legal in the way they comply with the laws of the land. That's very important to us. The third is that we are looking at entrepreneurs who are I would say across the sectors. So we are sector agnostic in that sense. We are also geography agnostic in that sense. Doesn't matter where you belong from, which part of India. You could be in one far end nook and corner of Assam, or it could be right in the middle of India, or it could be in Mumbai, it could be in north, it could be in south. Doesn't really matter. We are agnostic. The other criterion that we look at very closely is in terms of your commitment to transformation. So we are not interested in looking at entrepreneurs who are looking at only quick help. We will of course try to give that, and we will give you that in terms of either the connects with the market linkages in terms of the prospective networks, or in terms of looking at how you can be given immediate help, whether it's in terms of cash and by connecting with the right capital providers. But more importantly, we are looking at entrepreneurs and teams who are committed to devoting certain number of hours every week to make themselves improve. And that's an inward looking, more reflective kind of promoter or founder that we are looking at. If you fit these criteria, you would typically fit the first level selection that we would do. And then we have a diagnostic and discovery mechanism whereby we have developed a tool, automated tool, which will assess your eligibility to become a part of this program. And I would strongly encourage small entrepreneurs who are listening to this program and viewing this particular session to look at it very actively, look at our app, look at our sort of website, and I would encourage you to apply. And there will be a guidance given at every stage in terms of how you're navigating throughout your journey from being selected to being helped.
Excellent. Moving on to kind of support that has been announced by the government, Samir, and really I think one of the macro challenges that you talked about is this credit crunch and solving for that. And as you know, large package announced around liquidity, credit guarantees for small businesses, those with existing borrowings from banks and so on. What is your own sense of the efficacy of the package announced by the government? How do you think it's going to play out? And also, do you think there are some changes down the line that we will need to make?
Sure. So in terms of, and we are working very closely with the different parts of the government, including the Minister of MSMEs, by the way. And I believe that what government is trying to do in its intent is really noble and noteworthy. So let's not sort of beat about the bush and think what efforts they are taking are they worthy enough or not. I strongly believe that's a very good gesture. The difficult part about this particular 3 lakh crore credit or the large numbers that we are talking about is that at the end of the day, any government scheme is as effective as the stakeholders perceive it to be. And their perception is based on what is immediately given as a help. The challenges that the government faces are in terms of the execution of these schemes, because at the ground level, from the date of announcement to the date of money being actually transferred to their bank accounts, that length of time is a very important metric. And to large numbers of small entrepreneurs, this length of time could be a difference between staying alive or being dead. And I think that challenge is very, very important to be solved for the government. And I do believe that it's not only the job of the government, but it's also the job of so many stakeholders, including the private sector, to come together and look at ensuring that the implementation of this huge credit benefit that the government has announced at least reaches the smaller entrepreneurs quickly. That's very, very important. This is also given the fact that traditionally we have not been excellent implementers, although I must really congratulate Modi ji in terms of the way his vision is laid out, and in terms of the speed with which he would want to implement these things. But having said that, I think at the end of the day, on the ground, ensuring that this implementation happens speedily is very important. So that's a very important thing that we must look at. And I think that requires a strong governance mechanism to implement these schemes as far as the government is concerned. So that is what is needed to make it happen. The second thing which is needed to make it happen, really, I think from the change perspective, is that while we do appreciate that the government is trying to democratize the money being spent on a large number of entrepreneurs across large industries, etc., because at the end of the day, government has to support all of them. It's also very important to recognize what are our structural cluster strengths and weaknesses. And it's important that the country recognizes where is it that they want to deploy their resources. And it is, again, making choices. So you might actually spend money on those industries and segments which ultimately may not actually see the light of the day, or which may not be competitive within India as well as globally. Now, does it make sense for government to actually spend money there, or does it make sense for anybody to spend money there, is a big question mark. So I believe that as structurally and capabilities wise, we must be very clear that here are the 10, 15, 20, 25 very important pockets, clusters, industries, themes that the government money should be spent on, so that it is put to the right use. And ultimately, I see that there is the resources need to be redeployed to those sectors, to those industries, to those themes, and to those dimensions which are going to matter as far as Indian competitiveness goes globally. Because at the end of the day, while globalization is challenged today, tomorrow, after 5 years, we are going to start talking about it again. I can assure you of that. What that means is that we need to aspire to become globally competitive even today. And while Make in India, Atmanirbhar are all very noteworthy programs, at the end of the day, it boils down to an admission to the fact that which are the areas where we believe India is going to become competitive. And I think that's the second thing which is most importantly needed to put in place, to figure out whether you need to make choices in terms of where the money needs to be spent versus democratizing that. And that third element is really the whole aspect about management. At the end of the day, all this needs to be governed and managed very well. So when I'm talking about implementation, project management and skills out there, I'm talking about purely reskilling the different levels of the government, different levels of private sector to be able to make that happen collectively. Because tomorrow we need to collaborate with each other. We need to co-create. By competing with each other, we'll probably have a lot of bloodshed. My sense is that between governments and between private sector players and between private sector and government, we need to see lots of partnerships. So I think these are the 3-4 things which are needed to make it happen and to put India back on its trajectory to become a superpower tomorrow.
Thank you so much, Samir. I think that was an excellent sentiment to end up on. That really, I think going forward, we really need to take a more cooperation, collaboration lens rather than the competition lens, because I guess the field of competition is likely to be narrower with the response of COVID, at least in the short term. And as much as we can help, folks within our supply chains, for example, or work to strengthen them as one lever that a private sector entity can pull, rather than having the entire onus on the government. It's a very important sentiment to share out there with the ecosystem. Thank you so much, Samir, for your time, and thank you for coming on 60 Days, 60 Voices.
I appreciate it, and thank you, Gabe, for inviting me here. It's a pleasure to be here. And as you know, I think this is about partnerships. So we need to collectively ensure that our small business entrepreneur ecosystem really thrives tomorrow. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you, Samir.